The Senate will come to order. Mr. Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move to call the Senate. 5 people.
A call has been moved and properly sustained. Will the sergeants close the doors, allow no senators to leave, return all those senators who are absent back to the chamber? Will a clerk please call the roll?
Senators Bridges. Buckner. Coleman. Cook. Coram. Danielson.
Shout my name. I'm going to shout your name.
I did get you. Donovan. Finberg. Fields. Gardner. Janal. Gonzalez. Hanson. Heisey. Holbert. Jaquez Lewis. Kirkmeyer. Kolker. Lee. Senator Liston is excused.
Excused.
Lundeen. Moreno. Pedersen. Priola. Rankin. Rodriguez. Scott. Simpson. Smallwood. Sonnenberg. Story. Winter. Woodward. Zinzinger. You got a lot left.
Gonzalez. So where are we at? Mr. President.
Here, Mr. Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move the call be raised.
The motion is to raise the call. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed no. The ayes have it and the call is raised.
Oh no. Except. You did not. So we have everybody present except for Liston. Yeah, you didn't hit call the Senate, right? You just did on the roll call. No.
293.
Mr. Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that the Senate take up Senate Bill 293 on special orders, second reading of bills at the hour of 2:15.
The motion is that the Senate take up Senate Bill 293 at the hour of 14:15. This requires a two-thirds majority vote. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed no. The ayes have it. The motion is adopted, and the Senate will take up Senate Bill 293 on special orders at the hour of 14:15. Special order, second reading bill, Senator Bridges.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move the Senate resolve itself into the committee of the whole. It's a combined Senate and committee on that, not the whole city. Sorry. Let me start again, Mr. President. I move that the Senate resolve itself into the committee of the whole for the consideration of special orders, second reading of bills.
You have heard the motion. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed no. The ayes have it. The motion is adopted. The Senate will resolve itself into the committee of the whole for consideration of special orders, second reading of bills, and Senator Bridges will take the chair.
Sorry, James. The Committee of the Whole will come to order, and the Coat rule was relaxed by the President a couple weeks ago. Will the clerk please read the title to Senate Bill 293?
Senate Bill 293 by Senators Hansen and Rankin and Representative Escar, concerning property taxation in connection with establishing subclasses of residential and non-residential property for the 2022 and 2023 property tax years, temporarily reducing the assessment rate for property classified as agricultural property or renewable energy production property from 29% to 26 and 4/10% for property classified as multifamily residential real property, from 7 and 15/100% to 6 and 8/10% contingent on a related initiative not being approved by voters, and for all other residential property from 7 and 15/100% and 95/100%, restructuring this assessment rate laws and expanding the property tax deferral program to allow taxpayers to defer increases in property taxes in limited circumstances.
Senator Hansen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move Senate Bill 293 on second reading.
Seeing
And-
further discussion, just kidding. I'm not going to.
And the Finance Committee report.
To the Finance Committee report.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We made one very small change, technical in nature, in the Finance Committee, and I urge adoption of the report.
Served on the Finance Committee. I believe it was a significant and very important change that we made in that committee. Seeing no further discussion of the Finance Committee report, the question before us is the adoption of that report. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Ayes have it. The report is adopted. To the bill. There is an amendment coming to the desk. Will the clerk please read Amendment L010, or in binary 2?
Amendment L010 to Senate Bill 23 by Senator
Senator
Hansen.
Hansen.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I move L010 to
the
Senate Bill
amendment.
293.
Yes, to the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Colleagues, this is just a very small change. This essentially allows the deferral mechanism that's proposed in the bill to kick in after 4% instead of 4.6%. I think it's a really positive change for taxpayers around the state, and I urge adoption of L010.
Is there any further discussion? Senator Lundin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It is wonderful to start off in violent agreement. This is a good amendment.
I hope it's not too violent.
Look at that.
There are rules here. Seeing no further discussion of L010, the question before the body is the adoption of L010. All those in favor say aye. Opposed, no. Ayes have it, and that amendment is adopted. There is an amendment coming to the desk. Will the clerk please read Amendment L003?
Amendment L003 to Senate Bill
Senator
293.
Hansen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It is very loud down here at the well. I wonder if I could get a little help down here. I move L003.
To the amendment, Senator Hansen.
Thank you. Colleagues, L003 is really helping us to implement the deferral program that is proposed. Had some additional conversation with the different agencies, assessors, state treasurer's office, et cetera, that would help implement this, really an expansion of our current deferral process that we have for veterans and for the seniors. This then would open it up to more taxpayers that have primary owner-occupied homesteads. L003 creates a deferral program study so that we clearly understand during the next 12 months how to implement it, working through the state treasurer's office, and also sets up a minimum deferral amount, so kind of a de minimis clause of $100 for deferral. And with that, I urge your adoption of L003.
Is there any further discussion of L003? Seeing none, the question before us is the adoption of L003. All those in favor say aye. Opposed, no. Ayes have it. L003 is adopted. To the bill. Senator Rankin.
No, I just did the first two amendments.
So we want to move the bill.
We have. Yeah, we're on the bill.
Okay.
We're on the bill.
Senator Rankin.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Sorry to be running in late here. So let me just talk a little bit about why this bill and why now. Because I know it's late in the session. I know this is a pretty big bill, and So I think some explanation is required. But look, my involvement with this goes back to Gallagher repeal. Interim committee in summer of 17. I was actually the requester for our interim committee. I had 43 co-requesters on that, and we had the interim committee. A couple of us are still around who worked on that.
It was a pleasure to serve with you on that committee.
And with you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Rankin.
And I think there are a couple of others. Go back where you came from.
Too.
The big deal on Gallagher was causing havoc around the state, and because it would reset the residential rate based on a formula. But we knew at that time that it wasn't a very good idea to take averages, state averages, driven by front range housing prices, and reset a rate that applied to everybody all over the state. 64 counties, thousands of special districts, all of them scrambling every time this happened. And so the whole idea of repealing Gallagher was to get the state out of the situation where it was controlling property rates in all these different districts. Well, we thought at the time, and we talked a lot about leaving homeowners unprotected, because basically that's what it did. The original idea of Gallagher was a good one. It was to protect homeowners from rapidly escalating prices. What we should have done is come up with a mechanism that would be implemented at the county level or the individual district level to protect homeowners. One of my favorite stories is during those hearings in summer 17, I asked Dennis Gallagher, Senator Gallagher, who came and talked to us. I said, Senator, when you did that amendment, did you think about the fact that it would affect different parts of the state very differently? He said, no, but we should have. And that's, along comes Tabor, which did a lot of good things, and along came property valuations that went up and down, oil and gas driving some of it. And so we ended up with a really bad situation. We should have fixed it. We should have transferred this responsibility to local districts. I think we still should. I would say, I would like to, in fact, I intend to pull a bill title for next year to come back with a bill that we actually had written that would set up a situation where the counties would be responsible for a Gallagher-like calculation to protect homeowners. They don't necessarily want to do that, by the way. The county commissioners don't particularly want that responsibility on a local basis, but they should have it, and many of them already do through the mechanisms they have available. But in the meantime, until we can do that, next year through a referred measure or through a bill, we have a problem. We have a problem. We had a commitment to homeowners to protect them after Gallagher was repealed from these situations. We did not expect the situation to happen as fast and rapidly as it has, as soon and as rapidly as it has. So we have a situation where homeowners, but not uniformly across the state, not uniformly, that's a big difference, are very affected by rapidly escalating prices. So what's the solution? Well, we really have to do something because we left them vulnerable. But the solution is not a permanent, dramatic implementation of the very same thing that Gallagher did, which was to set a rate across the whole state based on averages. There's no such thing as an average. Nobody is average. I may look a little average, but there are a lot of people who really aren't average, and nobody is. The Air Force found out years ago, there's a book called Averages, that they were designing seats in airplanes for pilots on the average person, and they were having a lot of crashes. because nobody's average. So what was the solution? To adapt the seat to the pilot. We have to adapt the control of taxes and tax situations to the needs of local districts and the ability of those citizens to pay expressed in their votes. That's what this is all about. So the prudent way to do this is to look about 2 years into the future, because that's about as far as we can see, to give folks tax relief, to let them defer those taxes if they go up, and then to revisit it. Meanwhile, to design this process where we hand this off to counties. That's what this is all about. Sure, there's a ballot initiative out there, and there will be others. There'll probably be one every year. Taxpayers love to cut their taxes. I'd vote for it if I didn't understand its implications. I literally had, when we were in the Gallagher situation, I had fire departments selling fire trucks because of what they anticipated to happen to them under the Gallagher reset. Remember, their only option, if this resets and lowers their taxes by a dramatic, it doesn't take much, 10%. They have to go back to their voters and run a Tabor vote. It's expensive, uncertain. The level of uncertainty this puts on districts throughout the state and the cost of implementing it. And by the way, in the end, most of the taxes will be recovered through another form of taxes, whether that's income taxes for schools or increased taxes locally. So it really doesn't do that much good in the end after it all shakes out to change rates on a statewide basis. What's good for the Front Range, 9% growth in tax rates, is not good for a small district anywhere else in the state whose property values don't go up at all. Thanks to my co-prime on this for weeks of work, lots of numbers. There are a lot of numbers associated with this and different effects on different segments. So I will defer to my much brighter co-prime to go through some of the details of this.
Senator Hansen.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and a huge thank you to my co-prime sponsor for his hard work. We have worked diligently over the last several weeks, starting with a unformed lump of clay, keeping it on the wheel, working time after time to refine the proposal till we get to this point of 293, and we'll continue to do that together. And that is the wonderful part of this legislative process. I wanted to just quickly summarize what's happening in 293. We are creating new classifications of property tax treatment, multifamily, and basically everything else on the residential side. So instead of one category for residential, we will be creating two. And on the non-residential side, we'll go from one big category that's all-inclusive to creating 4 categories within the bill. And the important extension of that, and it's exactly what we promised when we advocated for the Gallagher repeal at this well last year, and what the voters subsequently and overwhelmingly supported, which was to bring Gallagher out of the Constitution and allow for careful management of property tax revenue across the state. That's what the voters have asked for, and that is what I believe we're delivering on with Senate Bill 293. We're providing clarity, we're providing some stability, we're providing some immediate relief to the categories that need it now. This is a bill that contemplates 2 years of changes. And then we come back and reassess. And we can look at options like my co-prime mentioned. Look at options around regionalization or doing this perhaps at a county level. Perhaps looking at additional categories that might be necessary at that point. But all to take into account the changing nature of the property market, the changing nature of our economy, and how that plays out for individual taxpayers. We need stable funding for schools, for water districts, for fire districts. These are critical services. They are fundamental to our success as a state for our promise that we've made to our parents and the children of this state. We know that. That's why the voters supported Gallagher repeal, because they saw the same critical need in moving forward with that initiative. That amendment, I should say, that was an amendment to the Constitution. So that's what we're proposing in 293. In addition to these category changes and some rate changes for those categories, the other important thing we're doing is extending the deferral program from its relatively small remit today, which is only for veterans and for seniors, and we're expanding that to all primary owner-occupied homestead, as it is established in statute. Homesteads will now be eligible to defer any property taxes as a tax lien on the property, anything over 4%. That is extremely important part of this bill. We'll make sure we don't forget that today. That is the safety release valve for our constituents. If we have a situation where we have high appreciation, taxpayers can defer, put that as a tax lien. We have no impact on local funding because the state would basically refinance that and make sure that local jurisdictions are whole. But importantly, that tax bill would then not become due until that property owner enjoys the proceeds of a property sale. So at that moment when they receive those capital gains and are most able to cover that tax liability, they'll be in a perfect position to do that. And I think that is a big step forward for the state and will drastically improve our property tax system. So that's the overview. That's what we're trying to accomplish. We create these additional categories because there is a specific reason to do it. Multifamily units draw differently on local resources than single-family homes. They're more dense, therefore they require less amount of expenditure for services per square foot, if you might look at it that way, or per linear foot of street space. Lots of different ways to measure that, but we have clear evidence of a difference in the draw on the public fiscus compared to single-family dwellings, and it's appropriate to create a separate category. And the same is true for the categories that we're creating in the non-residential side. Different use, different category. We clearly outlined that as we were discussing this bill in the Senate Finance Committee. So with that overview, I look forward to this debate. I again thank all the hard work that's been done by my co-sponsor and look forward to the passage of Senate Bill 293.
Mr. Minority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I rise in opposition to Senate Bill 293. I thought I would start my remarks by giving a shout out to Ray in Conifer. Ray emailed me a few months ago and he was frustrated with the Gallagher repeal. He was frustrated, his view and mine was that it was a two-step or multi-step process of raising property tax rates. Ray chastised me because I let it happen. And then I explained to him, no, I voted no. But I'm the leader of the caucus, so I let it happen. And I explained Article 5, Section 22A of our state constitution. Caucus positions prohibited. Penalties. And 22A says no member or members of the General Assembly shall require or commit themselves to any other member or members through a vote in a party caucus or any other similar procedure to vote in favor of or against any bill, appointment, veto, or other measure or issue pending or proposed to be introduced in the General Assembly. That's important to understand for folks like Ray who are frustrated because things happen that they don't like. And I understand. I didn't like the Gallagher repeal, and I don't like this bill. But the reason that Article 5, Section 22A is in our state constitution is that, in my opinion, I'm not an attorney, you know, but I think the people put this in their state constitution in 1876 because they wanted you and me and all of us to be accountable to them, not to each other. You're not accountable. Those in the minority caucus, they're not accountable to me as their leader. They've elected me as leader, but I can't tell them how to vote. I can't tell them what bills they can or can't sponsor. They get to decide that. Why? Because they're accountable to you, the people of Colorado, not me. And that's a really important perspective to have on a bill like Senate Bill 293. Like I said before, I'm a no vote. I represent half of Douglas County, about 18 miles south of this building. Our property values tend to be comparatively high. Not necessarily because we have high property tax rates, but because the property's worth a lot. There's a finite amount of property in this beautiful place between Arapahoe County and El Paso County. There's a finite amount of property, and just about every square inch of it is highly desirable. So we have relatively high property tax or property values, and our elected officials, our county commissioners, we in the legislature, our assessors, our coroners, we work really hard to try to keep property taxes low, assessments as low as possible, but the properties are appreciating. I represent an area that if you went back 20 or 30 years ago, it'd be more like Weld County. There was a lot of ag, there was a lot of cattle. Now there's a lot of houses. And the open land that's available, there's going to be houses on those properties pretty soon. The majority of my constituents, if they knew what Senate Bill 293 is or was, and the ballot initiative that I think will probably appear, and if it does, that the majority of people who I represent will vote yes on that ballot initiative, they'll say they want to pay lower property tax rates, pay less tax, and then leave them alone. That's the district that I represent. Not everybody in the district would agree with that, certainly, but the majority would. Vote no on 293. If they knew what it meant, what it proposed to do, I'm confident the majority of people who I represent would say, Senator Holbert, vote no, and I'm going to. But as the leader of the Republican caucus, I'm not in a position to say, you can't sponsor this bill, and I'm certainly not in a position to say, you can't vote for it. I know what the Constitution tells me. I can't do that. I also understand that there are members of our caucus who represent rural districts. And I don't want to speak for all members of the caucus, but I've heard from several who say 293 is good for their district. So imagine my good friend from Carbondale, he's got his name on the bill. I imagine he's got a better feel, better understanding what the majority of constituents in that district, Senate District 8, is that right? Get the numbers mixed up, but I'm guessing that he thinks, is pretty assured that the majority of people who live in Senate District 8 think this is a pretty sweet idea. I can't tell him he can't do this. Who decides he's going to do this? He does. And that's okay. Why? Because that's what the people of Colorado wanted in 1876 when they put this clause in their state constitution. That's why it works this way. Now, I'm frustrated because I think the organization working to put the question on the ballot to cut property tax rates, I think they're going to be successful. And the gentleman who managed that organization, I talked to him on the phone, and he's not very happy about this bill. Why? Because if you, the people of Colorado, have the opportunity to vote on that, I think the majority of us, because I'll vote yes, would say yes, and it will pass, and you'll pay less property tax. Now, in the district that I represent, if that passes, if it gets to the ballot and it passes, and this bill passes, the constituents that I represent, their property taxes won't go down as much. I don't like that. I'd like my property taxes to go down more. And that's why I'm voting no on Senate Bill 293. If the ballot initiative passes, I like that. I'm not on the Joint Budget Committee. That doesn't give me a heart attack. I imagine those who do might be struggling with that. That's about $1 billion hit if that passes, as I understand. But if that passes on the ballot and this bill passes, it's less than that. I've heard 200, 300 million. I think we'll hear more on the details. So where'd the other 700, 800 million go? This bill. If that ballot initiative doesn't appear on the ballot, or it does and it doesn't pass, this bill would actually provide some relief, I think. What are we going to do? I'm going to vote no. And those of you who represent districts that are more urban or suburban, less ag, I think you're probably wise to at least consider, do the people in your district want you to vote yes or no? I can't speak for my friend who also doesn't live in Parker, but my guess is he's probably going to vote no like me, because he knows the people in the other half of Douglas County, who majority of whom are probably going to say, no, we want the ballot initiative to pass and we don't want the bill. But I wanted to come and just offer a little bit of perspective of what it's like to be not only a senator in this unique state legislature, but the leader of a caucus. Ray and Conifer and everybody out there who thinks like Ray, this ain't Congress. This is the Colorado General Assembly, and we operate under a constitution that's unique because you, the people of Colorado, gave it to us. And on this issue, it's really important that you understand that there's diversity of opinion in this chamber, and the people, like my good friend from Carbondale, who are voting yes on this bill and putting their name on it, they're representing their constituents. What I'm asking is for those of you who represent districts like mine that are more urban or suburban, think about what your constituents want. They want a little bit of relief or a lot of relief from property tax. Mine, I'm confident, will favor a lot. I ask for a no vote on the bill, and if you have a chance to sign the petition or vote on that measure, I'd say sign it and vote yes. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Lundin.
To the bill. Thank you, Mr. Chair. And thank you to the minority leader for his comments. I appreciate them very much. They are spot on target. I'm going to continue to extend into this conversation around context of what is actually happening here. And it begins with a little bit broader understanding of initiatives, the initiative process, and what the minority leader just talked about, how the people of Colorado have a unique ability to engage in the management, the governance of themselves. Now, I'm kind of a Madisonian kind of guy. I believe that you elect representatives, you hope you've elected smart people, you ask them to do a good job, you send them down to the legislature, you hope that the first floor, that would be the executive, doesn't actually get in the way of legislating, and the members of that legislative body write good laws. That's kind of the way I approach it. But Colorado has a tradition that provides an alternative pathway, and it's been in the Constitution since the 1890s. The reality is the Constitution, Article 5, Section 1, and the state law, Articles 40, 41, and Titles 1 of the Colorado Revised Statute provide for this initiative process. Now you, person of Colorado, citizen of Colorado, highly motivated advocate of Colorado, because it takes effort, that's right, to the majority leader, he's one of those kind of people, got himself elected. You may go out to the Secretary of State's website right now and walk through a process that gives you the ability to change the Constitution or change the law. You can legislate, essentially. That's in the Constitution. And that's what's happened with regard to an initiative that is pretty far down the pathway, Initiative 27, that has come to the surface because of something we did last year. We repealed the Gallagher Amendment. And that had a negative consequence on people's property tax. Now, you can get into the semantical fight of whether that raised people's property taxes or whether that lowered people's property taxes. The reality is the effect of that repeal of Gallagher has caused people to not get a reduced tax rate that they would have gotten. We'll talk more about those tax rates in a minute. But back to the process that is well underway, that the people have stood up on their hind feet and said, we want to, in fact, interact with something that the legislature has done in a way that provides some security and policy protection for us. And so they've walked through the process. The process includes things like submitting a proposal for review and comment. This is all you work through the Secretary of State's website, or through the Secretary of State. You submit the typewritten text of your proposed measure to the Legislative Council. That's here in the building, comes to the Leg Council. There's a review and comment meeting. You walk through the review of the wording and the initiative. You make sure it all lines up with what the law needs to look like when the law happens. You give public notice so that the people of Colorado more broadly can participate in the process. There's a submission of revised proposals. You have to file that ultimately with the Secretary of State. You file the original proposal. The proposal is revised with revisions, highlighted and otherwise indicated, if applicable, in the final language of the proposal. Then you go to title setting. This is an interesting thing. Ballot titles must be brief, unambiguous, and in the form of a question that is answered yes to vote in favor of the proposed change and no to vote against the proposed change. This is about making it clear from the people, on behalf of the people, for the people. Wonderful process. So you walk on from that meeting to a revision and proposed title board meeting. The title board finds if the title board finds that the proposal contains more than one subject and therefore declines to set the title, the proponents may change the proposal and resubmit. Just trying to give you a flavor of how prescriptive the process, which is readily available for the people, is. And this is important because the people are well down the pathway in this process of saying, you know, that repeal of Gallagher that happened by the legislature last year, we have concerns and we'd like to take action on that, and they are underway. The people are now already underway. There's a rehearings process by the title board, appeals to the title board, signature gathering. This is where it gets interesting, and this is kind of the inflection point where the people of Colorado who are rising up to interact on this subject are at. You have to go out and gather enough signatures to get on the ballot, and you submit those signatures. They're verified. Then you have the ability to cure if there's questions on the signatures, and ultimately, you end up on the ballot. Well, what's that look like for this specific initiative, Initiative 27? Well, the original text was filed with the title board on April 9th. The title board hearing was on April 30th. The title was approved on April 21st, and the petition format was approved May 3rd. Now, the petition deadline, you got to go out and collect all those petitions. That's in August, August 3rd. It's still in front of us. But the point is, Initiative 27 is well underway. It's got a specific title, the words, the language, it's all there on behalf of the people. Some of that language says things like, it's a measure to reduce the residential property tax assessment rate from 7.15% to 6.5%. Well, those are interesting numbers. 7.15 is where we would be at based on the calculations, based on the repeal of Gallagher. The 6.5 is a number that was picked out of the air and plugged in by those who want this initiative. Coincidence? That's the same number that appears in 293. It also goes on to say on non-residential property, the assessment rate goes from 29% down to 26.4%. Now, here's talking about these rates, and I'm going to confine myself, at least in this first round of the conversation, to the residential property rate, so we can just make it clear for purposes of illustration. Know that the same thing's happening on the non-residential side to a certain extent as well.
An effort to confine yourself to the bill would also just be appreciated. Just flagging. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. All context, all critically important to the debate and discussion of the bill. But I am being diligent. I would love to talk about airplane hangars, but we did that on a previous bill.
Done. Settled. Thank you.
So we repealed the General Assembly, and I will tell you I voted against it because I saw the repeal of Gallagher as a potential to return to the days where you can actually tax people out of their homes. Tragic. You don't want that to happen. That's why Gallagher happened in the first place. People were being taxed out of their homes. So we came up with a complicated formula that said you can't push the homeowners out any faster than this way, and will burden commercial property, will burden businesses. And that created a distortion and a complexity that ultimately was untenable, and the repeal of the Gallagher happened. Well, if that repeal had not happened, where would we be today on behalf of the homeowners of Colorado? Well, the 7.15% rate that they're going to pay now would be 5.8%. Am I correct on that? I want to be precise. 5.8 and change. It's fundamentally 5.8%. So the repeal raised the rate that the folks are going to pay out there this year. Would have been 5.8. Now it's going to be 7.1. The people rose up and said, hey, we're going to run an initiative and drive it down to 6.5. And a bill appears on the horizon after the initiative process is well down the way to say, we'll take it 6.52 for 2 years. Now, you can look at this in a range of perspectives. You can say, well, that's unfortunate that legislators, after the people have already started to take action and have been bound into specific language by the title board, legislators would rise up and drop into the process something that disrupts what the people are choosing to do. You could say that's unfortunate, if you want to be charitable, or you could cry chicanery, trickery, deception. I'll leave it to you to make that judgment as to how you want to perceive this. But the reality is, it creates a complexity, an unfortunate series of events. I found myself in the Finance Committee hearing as this bill passed through. We got a glimpse of this bill in Finance yesterday. I found myself in the unusual circumstance of being on the same side with the same conclusion with the Bell Policy Institute, and we argue consistently about economic matters, finance matters, and we tend to be on opposite sides, and the Colorado Fiscal Institute. They also oppose this bill. Now, they're coming at it slightly differently, but their answer is opposition to 293. So, this first round of discussion is what I would describe as the disruption to the process that the people already have underway to manage their interaction with property taxes, because they've been moved from what would have been 5.8% in rate to 7.15 by the General Assembly's repeal of the Gallagher, and they have said, we would prefer to take that down to 6.5 in perpetuity. Meanwhile, legislators rise up and say, all right, now that you're locked into a title, you have to run to the people with this language. We're going to introduce confusion into the process, whether for good or for ill, whether well-intended or malintended. The fact is, it creates confusion before the people. Ask the Bell Policy Institute. Ask the Colorado Fiscal Institute. Ask any number of my colleagues who will be voting in opposition, as you heard the minority leader speak earlier, to 293. Does this disrupt that process in a way that does violence to the people's understanding of their ability to participate in the governance of themselves? I argue it does, and I argue, therefore, for a no vote on Senate Bill 293. Later in the discussion, we'll actually offer up an amendment, a way to get to intellectual clarity around this issue. If it is, in fact, to be beneficial, then let's make it clear. It's either the initiative wins the day if it passes, or the bill wins the day. We'll make it an either or, a binary choice, instead of the confusion that has been created by the presentation of Senate Bill 293 as it is presented to you now.
Senator Rankin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, I just quickly want to, I think there's some false assumptions going on here. The first false assumption is that the citizens of Douglas County ought to vote on the taxes for small districts, 2,000 special districts and school districts all over the state. That's a false assumption. Why should that be? The Greeks talked about this when they basically invented politics. It's called the dictatorship of the majority, because home prices in Douglas County go up 9%. They can totally absorb a 6.5% assessment rate. I'd probably vote for it if I lived there. So that's part of the issue. But it's our responsibility to not bow to the dictatorship of the majority, but to represent all of Colorado as a legislature, no matter where we live. No matter where we live, it's our responsibility to think about all the citizens of Colorado. Second point is, this is not the only tool. Weld County has my colleague from Weld County has a temporary mill levy decrease in place in response to increasing property taxes from oil and gas. There are other tools. You don't have to take a meat axe to all of Colorado and let the majority dictate just because the Front Range has more votes and it benefits them. You don't have to do that. You can, county commissioners can lower their mill levy in every district without a Tabor vote. You can lower it, and you can do it temporary so that when the economy changes, you can raise it back. You do not have to do this kind of action. But here we are. We're stuck with this situation. So what's our job? Our job is to manage it as best as we can. You might call it chicanery, but it's in the law. It's been done before. What we're trying to do is manage on behalf of all the citizens without hurting anybody, but yet allow tax breaks. That's what this is all about. So think about the fact that this, I know this has shifted to be talking about a ballot initiative. We ought to be talking about the bill, because what the bill does is manage the situation.
Senator Hansen.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and this is such an important part of this debate. And I think the good Senator from Carbondale just finished with something I want to reiterate, which is we're talking about 293 today. There is action that was taken by a small group of advocates to advocate for a title. They got approval for a title. Fantastic. That's great. That happens all the time, every year. There's no initiative yet, to be clear. It's not on the ballot. I also want to take us back in time to 2004. What was going on in Colorado in 2004? Well, the legislature was controlled by Republicans, both chambers. The governor's office was a Republican. And that trifecta passed House Bill 2004-1455. I just happened to have a printout of that fine piece of legislation. What does that piece of legislation say? Well, I'm going to share with you a short excerpt, which I think is highly relevant to what we're doing here today. They responded to a title. They responded to a title with House Bill 04-1455. And in that legislation, they say such initiatives are the result of a process that lacks some of the critical elements of the representative system of state government, Madisonian, including debate, deliberation, flexibility, compromise, transparency, and does not involve all the checks and balances that exist within the representative state government. Folks, we live in a republic. We are the stewards of that republic here in this body. That bill goes on to say such initiatives adversely affect the ability of the General Assembly to develop policies and funding priorities in a comprehensive and balanced manner, as most recently illustrated by the difficulties encountered by the General Assembly in trying to balance the state budget during the past few fiscal years. That's exactly what we're doing here, folks. We are carefully managing the finances of the state of Colorado. That's what we got hired to do. That was the promise that we made when we repealed Gallagher. That is part of our job responsibility. In the case of your two co-sponsors, we are pleased to serve you on the Joint Budget Committee. That is what we do here every day, every year, every session. And 293 is squarely in that category. So yes, we take this seriously. We need to manage the finances of the state. And sometimes that means the necessity of Senate bills like 293. I urge your support for this important legislation.
Senator Lundeen.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I appreciate very much the level of this conversation and debate. I think it is an important set of issues, and I think we are making an effort to thoroughly and deeply discuss them. To this question of local politics, I agree. I think all politics is local. There's no question about that. The initiative would seek to restore something that is closer to the balance that existed prior to the repeal of Gallagher. It would not prevent a local school district or a local fire district or any of the other local districts to choose to raise more money should they need to do that. It simply says the statewide perspective previously was at a rate that is now being reset at 7.15, would have been 5.8, and the initiative would bring it back to 6.5. It seeks to restore some level of balance that is similar to what existed previously. Why is this important? If you have gotten an assessor statement, happen to own a home or property here in Colorado in the last few weeks, those statements typically have just come out, you are seeing that your taxes are going up significantly. And it's not just because of the rate change, although the rate change is fundamental to what's going on. It's based on the assessed value. It's based on the underlying value of your property. We have a significant uptrend in the value of real property in Colorado right now. And that creates a burden on the cash flows of the people of Colorado, especially those who live, perhaps working still, or maybe are retired and living on a fixed income. Very important construct. Restoring some balance, as the initiative would do, is an important piece to that, to get to what I would call status quo ante Gallagher repeal. The reality is, should local districts, the fire districts and others, need to take action other than selling fire trucks, their capacity to do so is rooted in the local politics. And all politics is, as it should be, I believe, as local as possible. To this question of the Act from 2004, 1455, the restriction and careful management of the government of the state, I agree. We wear, in some ways, two hats as legislators on behalf of the General Assembly of Colorado and on behalf of the people of Colorado. We're kind of the board of directors for Colorado government. I think we need to make an effort to manage the government as efficiently and effectively as possible. And I would pause to offer sincere commendation to the Joint Budget Committee. And we have two members of the Joint Budget Committee here and another sitting in the chamber intently minding this debate carefully. I mean, it's remarkable that where other of our colleagues are off taking care of other business, this particular debate is so important to the budget management of Colorado that the chair of the Joint Budget Committee is participating, and I hope, quite frankly, he stays in his seat because I suspect he's on the other side of this issue. But the fact that we have this responsibility to managing the state government, that's part of our job. But also, not only are we the board of directors for Government Colorado, we are the representatives of the people. And it is our job to help them have the best possible ability to manage their family budgets with as much favor as we can possibly give them. And that is the other side of this debate. It's about lowering the tax burden on the individuals of the state of Colorado. It's about representing their interest, not representing our interest as the managers of the government of the state of Colorado. So I would say 1455 is interesting. I think the arguments they made are interesting. I don't think they're conclusive. And if this at some point continues to a debate in the next realm, which would be much more adversarial in nature in the courts, then that would be settled out at that time with other arguments and other understandings of the law as applied. So I wanted to rise and respond as best I could to the reasonable, but I think inconclusive arguments offered by my colleagues.
Senator Quorum.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We've certainly got out of my wheelhouse here, but listening to the good senator from Monument, I'm a little confused because you were talking about a massive tax increase. So I can't find in the bill where we're eliminating Tabor. Because in my county, I know how it works. we have a Tabor cap. And to the chagrin of a lot of people, people from Douglas and Jefferson County are selling out their high dollar homes and moving to my area and living in a much nicer home with extra cash. And, you know, we appreciate them bringing their money. We wish they'd spend more time over here, but that's a different story for a different day. So I'm trying to figure out, as they move in, we still have a revenue cap on Tabor. So I'm trying to figure out how this is a massive tax increase without eliminating Tabor.
Senator Lundin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As I approached that portion of my prior exposition, I was very cautious to call out the fact that you can call this whatever you want to call it, but the net effect is that which would have been a 5.8% rate paid on property by the people of Colorado is now a 7.15% rate. It's more money coming out of the pocketbooks of the people of Colorado. Rate increase, rate decrease, doesn't matter. It's less money in the hands and pocketbooks of the people of Colorado. So I'll leave the response to that with that.
Senator Kirkmeyer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I rise in opposition to Senate Bill 293. And this has been a really hard one for me. And I've been debating this. This is a great debate. I really appreciate it. Been having some really great discussions with my colleagues about this. It's really hard for me to say I'm opposing a bill that will decrease taxes for businesses and for property owners. And I have my reasons, but before I get there, I just want to talk a little bit I'm going to give a little historical perspective. And I do agree with my friend and the good senator from Carbondale about Gallagher causing havoc. It did cause havoc to some degree, but it didn't really cause havoc until you added on Tabor in 1993. Gallagher was put in place to protect the property owners. And you remember the 45-55 that got repealed? So that as an aggregate, property tax from residential families, units, primary, multifamily, wouldn't be more than 45% statewide. That's why the Senators Gallagher and Stewart, good senators from Denver and Boulder, put it in place. That's how they got it in place. Completely agree. 1992 happens and Tabor passes. That's what caused havoc. Because prior to Tabor, Gallagher came in place. We were having a ratcheting down of the residential assessment ratio because in about 1987, 1986, somewhere in there, the residential ratio was actually 26%. And thanks to Gallagher, it was going down, going down. But what local governments, local districts who collect property tax, because the state does not, what local districts were able to do was float their mill levy. So your assessment ratio for residential goes down, it's stable for commercial, agriculture, everything else. And if the revenues coming in weren't such to provide the level of service that your constituents were demanding, you were able to say, I'm going to raise that mill levy. Didn't have to go to a vote. Tabor happens, you now have to go to a vote. You can't just go in and raise the mill levy. No more floating mill levy there. And I heard the discussion about transferring this to the local districts. And in effect, Tabor had a provision. There is an out for the local districts. It's called a vote. You know, Tabor had limitations in it. So you can't raise your revenue, can't raise your expenditures over a certain percentage, can't raise the mill levy, got to go to a vote. You want to keep that excess revenue? Got to go to a vote. You want to raise your mill levy? You got to go to a vote. You want to increase your expenditures over that percentage rate that's developed every year? Got to go to a vote. So there's an out. And from a local government perspective, I will tell you, we don't sit there and say, God, we want to provide all these services, and so now we got to go tax everybody to get to this level of service. Because I think of it in a totally different way. And it's that the revenues that you bring in should be commensurate with the level of service that you're going to provide. You can't write more out of your checking account than what you have. So you've got to look at the services that need to be provided, that government should be providing, and you need to make adjustments within your budget. And the good senator from Carbondale is correct. I'm from a county. I led my county to no debt. We have absolutely no debt. And we all talked about a 13% reserve, a 15% reserve. We have a 30% reserve. And that's when I was executive director of the Department of Local Affairs, what we would encourage every local government to get to. Have capital development, have capital improvement plans, have budgets in place, have good, healthy reserves. Remember, Tabor requires you to have a certain amount of reserve that you can't dip into unless there's an act of God, essentially, and then you have to replace it the next year. So there are all sorts of ways that local governments can deal with these assessment ratios that are fluctuating. And not only do we have no debt in Weld County, we continually work to temporarily reduce our mill levy, and we have a 7 mil temporary reduction. So what happened? 1993, local governments were trying to figure out how to deal with Tabor. This state was trying to figure out how to deal with Tabor. Legislature passed a whole ration of bills on how to deal with Tabor. In fact, in one issue in Tabor was that the state could no longer mandate programs to local governments. And Weld County found out the hard way after going to the Supreme Court that that didn't mean counties, that meant everybody but counties. But we went through that case. But we also started learning as local governments how to deal with Tabor. And everyone started debrucing because there is the ability within Tabor to go to the vote. And so you had community after community. In fact, we have, I think, 176, it's either 174 or 176 school districts who have debruced. We have several of our municipalities debruced. Water districts, fire districts, library districts, everyone can debruce. And you know what that requires? It requires a vote. It requires elected officials going to their constituents and saying, you need to trust us. You're saying you want this level of service. We're telling you this is how much it's going to cost, and this is what your property taxes need to be. And so it requires a vote. So local governments have a way around this. And so as we move further, and we're figuring out how the ratcheting down with Gallagher and Tabor approaches and how it's working and how it's just for some districts it doesn't work, because no matter how hard that school district over in the Lochbuie area of Weld County wants to increase their taxes, their citizens keep saying no. That's their citizens who are saying, this is the amount of taxes we want to pay, and we're okay with the level of service that we're getting. If we want more service, then we know we need to increase our taxes. But here's what all of our special districts figured out. And then all local districts have figured out. They figured out how to de-Gallagherize, a new term. They figured out how to get back to pre-Tabor. They figured out how we can go to a vote and ask our voters if we can float our mill levy like we used to do before 1993. So local districts have the ability, regardless of what the assessment ratio is on residential, on agriculture, on commercial, on oil and gas or anything, they have the ability to deal with this issue. The problem is, sometimes elected officials aren't in tune with their constituents, and when their constituents tell them, no, we don't want to increase our taxes, then all those, I know it happened to me 2 years ago, all those fire districts and some of those local districts are like, we can't get our constituents to vote for increased taxes. We really want to go buy that new fire truck, and our constituents are telling us no. So you county commissioners, and they came down here and said to all of you, you state legislators, you need to repeal Gallagher. And y'all put it on the ballot. Guess what? I don't think I should have to have an increase in my taxes so that the fire district out in northeast Weld County can get a new fire truck when their citizens tell them, no, we want you to deal with the services, provide services commensurate with the property taxes that we are paying now. We don't want to pay more property taxes. So then we get on the ballot the repealing of Gallagher. I voted no because it is an increase in property taxes for residential properties. I think we all have an understanding how it works. Assessment ratio times assessed value times mill levy. Get your property tax. If your mill levy can't go up without a vote, you know exactly what your mill levy is going to be. If your assessment ratio is frozen at 7.1.5 or 6.5 or 6.95 or 6.8 or whatever you put it at, you know what that is. The fluctuating deal here is the assessed value. And in some counties along the Front Range, like Weld County, like Douglas County, or two of the fastest growing counties in the nation, those residential values go up. Property basically stays about the same, but when you froze that assessment ratio by repealing Gallagher, my property taxes went up, and so did everyone else in this area, and anybody else whose assessed values went up, their property taxes went up. They certainly didn't go down. The only way your property taxes could go down is if your assessed values went down. That happens in a few of our counties. That happens in a few of our counties, not in the majority of our counties. So, this isn't about stabilizing funding. Local governments have the tool that they need to stabilize the fund to be able to provide the services that are commensurate with the revenues that they bring in. If their citizens don't like it, go vote for something different. You know, I know it's probably going to be very small of me, but I'm just going to say I told you so. 2 years ago, I was down here and I testified in at least 3 or 4 different committees with regard to Senate Bill 181. And within those committees, testified in coordination with the Weld County Assessor. And we told you that if you cream oil and gas in this state, that if you knock it down and you make it hard to get a permit, you put in the setbacks and you do everything you wanted to do, that there would be at least a 9% loss in revenues across the state in every local district. Because the oil and gas, the 55% of that 45-55 formula, oil and gas was holding up the residential assessment ratio. It was holding things up. So when you cut that out, you messed with the assessment ratios, screwed things up. At that time when we were testifying, we didn't know there was going to be a price war 8 months later between Saudi Arabia and the Russians. We didn't know that. And what occurs is we started getting an 18% loss in revenues, and districts were whining and crying all over the place because they knew if they had to go ask their own constituents for a tax increase, it wasn't going to happen. And what's the effect to the state? God, you got to backfill those school districts. So I greatly appreciate the Joint Budget Committee and what you have to look at, and that you have to do that balancing. No different than all the other elected officials in local districts, however, and it's a balancing act, and that's what your job is. I don't think my job is to try and keep increasing taxes. And that's why this is so difficult for me to say no, because, man, I would love to be on the side with the good senator from Carbondale and be able to go tell all my agricultural producers in Weld County that it's a guarantee for the next 2 years they're going to have a 9% decrease in taxes. That would be wonderful to do. So, to the bill, even more to the bill, and to where I'm going to is with an amendment. This bill does create new classifications and subclasses. It basically gives a new definition for residential and a new definition for non-residential. And it's going to affect property taxes throughout the state, including those in the school districts. And you did look at additional categories. The other thing that is listed in this bill, because we keep saying we're not talking about the initiative, but we are talking about an initiative in the bill. And it's, you know, it's no secret, Initiative 27 is out there. It's out there. We all know what the ballot title says. And in this bill, it reads that the assessment rate for agricultural property and renewable energy production property will be temporarily reduced from 29 to 26.4% for the next 2 years. The next sentence says, and this is in the bill summary, the law is restructured so that if a proposed initiative to reduce the assessment rate for non-residential property is approved by voters, then it would only apply to lodging property. That's what that definition change did. That's what adding in classifications did. I know we want to just say we're trying to have different classes and bring different things in and look at protecting property owners, but really what we're doing here is trying to influence and impact an initiative. The same thing happens with residential. We changed the definition in this legislation for residential so that it only refers to multifamily. And it doesn't refer to the primary occupation of a primary owner occupied classification. That becomes its own subclass, so it wouldn't be in the definition. And it also says in section 3, again in the bill summary, the law is restructured so that if a proposed initiative to reduce the residential assessment rate is approved by voters, then it would only apply to multifamily residential. So, I mean, I think good try trying to hide that, but I think it's pretty obvious. I think the voters can see through that. I think we can too. I think, to me at least, it's pretty obvious. I'm sure we're going to hear some rebuttal on that, but I just think it's obvious. So, I do have an amendment. I can give you that one. Thanks, sorry.
There is an amendment at the desk. Will the clerk please read L015?
Amendment L015.
Senator Kirkmeyer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move L015.
To the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I won't read everything through this amendment. I'll just give you basically what it does. And then I'm going to give you my reasons why I have this amendment. Basically, the amendment would say that the bill will only apply if the ballot issue fails. If any ballot issue fails, but I think I'm talking about Initiative 27. I think probably everyone else is too, but that's what I'm talking about. And I'm going to tell you why this is so important for me, why I believe so much in this, versus not being able to vote for this bill in a tax decrease. I ran a whole career as a county commissioner. I ran my campaign for state senate on the fact that I would come and rein in state government just like I did in county government, and that we would decrease taxes. But the other thing that I believe very strongly in is the Constitution. And I believe very strongly in the fact that our Constitution allows for the people the ability to restrict and essentially give explicit direction to their government at every level. Essentially, the Constitution has a delegation of legislative authority to the people. And so the way we're going about this, kind of at the 11th hour, maybe it doesn't feel that way, and I'm not trying to slam the good sponsors here, but to me it feels like that the 11th hour, we're at the end of the session, ballot title's been set, can't be changed. I think we are maneuvering around, manipulating the process. Essentially, to me, it feels like we are pulling the rug out from the people with their right to do an initiative. Voters have the ability to weigh in on a ballot issue. This ballot title for Initiative 27 is set. It can't be changed. There's processes that go through it, can't be changed. We all know that. So to come in with a bill, 293, at the 11th hour, and pull the rug out from underneath the people who are trying to pass an initiative, whether you are for the initiative or against the initiative, it doesn't matter to me. What matters is basically we are not allowing the people their right to an initiative without interference from the legislative body. It feels to me like an abuse of our power, and that's what I don't like. The initiative process provides voters an opportunity to participate in the policy-making arena, to address issues that are of great concern to them and to other members of the public. This is their right. It's an initiative process. It's in our Constitution. If we don't like it, then put a ballot in it, refer a ballot initiative, you have the numbers, you can get it done, and change the process. But instead, we're trying to maneuver around that process. We're trying to maneuver around the Constitution, when we should be working to assure the public that there is integrity in our process, that they should be able to have confidence in our process, that they should be able to have trust in the process. Instead, we're not doing that. We're doing it what I think is a bait and switch. And so, for those reasons, I would hope that you would all join me in supporting L015. Thank you.
Senator Lundin.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I rise in support of Amendment L015. This is kind of the truth in lending, truth in taking, truth in legislating amendment. It simply says that Sections 1, 2, and 3 of this Act, the effective part of the Act, take effect at the November 21st. Section 1, 2, and 3 of this Act take effect if, at the November 2021 statewide election, a majority of voters do not approve an initiated measure concerning property tax reductions, or if there's no such measure on the ballot for the election. And in either case, Sections 1, 2, and 3 take effect on December 31st, 2021. So it simply says that this bill, 293, prevails if the people don't say, no, we've got a better idea, or no, the idea that we have already developed through the title board or working through the process doesn't continue forward or does not prevail at the ballot box. It also goes on to say that Sections 1, 2, and 3 of this Act shall not take effect if, at the November 2021 statewide election, a majority of the voters approve an initiated measure concerning property tax reductions. Again, so it says the same thing two different ways. Why does this matter? Because you can find yourself in a circumstance where you have both the initiative prevailing and the legislation prevailing, and then not be sure which elements prevail. And quite frankly, as written, it would appear that 293 would prevail. What does that mean to the people? It means that a tax reduction that this bill is holding out as the shiny object, tax reduction in 293, come and get it, only lasts for 2 years. It goes away. Poof. It disappears. This clarifies that. It's really is this about policy, or is it about disrupting a process where the people are seeking to lower their taxes? It's potentially more nuanced, and I suspect you'll hear arguments to the contrary, but I think this amendment clarifies our perspective as a legislative body. Are we intruding into a process that the people have underway, or are we allowing the people the opportunity to have their will spoken clearly Can what they're asking for, in fact, prevail even in the existence of this legislation? With this amendment, that question is askable and answerable with clarity and integrity. Without this amendment, confusion will reign. I urge your support of L015.
Senator Rankin.
So with great respect to my friend, the senator from Monument and the senator from Weld County, I would argue for exactly the same principle. Exactly the same principle for local people being in charge of their destiny. This is not a single entity we're talking about here. This is not one big taxing district called the state of Colorado. This is like thousands of special districts. It's like school districts, 174 of them, 78. Thank you. It's like 64 counties. These are not one entity. So what you're actually suggesting by any statewide movement, including this bill, as a matter of fact, is us assuming that we can make decisions on the average for one entity. That's not true. In fact, by doing this, you are in fact removing the will of every one of those voters, every one of those districts. You're not allowing them to control their own destiny. You're in fact forcing them to do some strange things. Go out and spend $10,000, $20,000 in a local fire district running a bill to get back enough revenue to buy their fire engines. There are plenty of districts in this state whose assessed value of property will not go up at all, much less 9% in Douglas County. I mean, we're not talking about a single entity here. So what's our responsibility to all of those districts as legislators? It's not to just bow to the will of the majority. It's to govern the state. It's to do laws to take care of all of those different districts in perhaps different ways. Sure, they have tools, as very well articulated by my friend the senator from Weld County. There are a lot of tools, but they don't all have those. And they can't all run to their local constituency and convince them, spending thousands of dollars. They can't convince them that they need to raise their mill levy because the state, on average, decided that we should lower their taxes. Can't do that. That's hard to do. It's expensive. Do you know where this money actually, now, I'm going to go back to the number that's in the ballot initiative just because it's a good round number, $1 billion. And let's just assume that that's off of a flat base. It isn't, because Douglas County's taxes are going to go up so much that they can absorb this cut. But let's just assume. Where would that money go? Where would those cuts occur? 50% goes to public schools. Half of the 50% goes in the formula, and the state would make that up. You know where the other 25% goes? $250 million. It would go to local mill levy overrides. I hate those things. That is the most unconstitutional, unfair system of funding schools that could ever exist. And we're the worst of all the states in doing that. It's local money of high asset value, rich districts. They will lose. So you're going to have to go back to your mill levy override vote if you want to keep that money in the rich districts, because that doesn't automatically get replaced. The rest of it, the other half, is special districts and counties. So this is not a simple problem. You can't just go in and say, okay, you know, real estate values on average are going to go up, so we're going to cut it enough to absorb that increase. Sounds good. Sounds good. We ought to do it in Douglas County, but it ought to be for that county. It ought to be for one county at a time. So I think I'm arguing for exactly the same principle by saying that we have to manage this situation. We're going to make it 2 years temporary instead of permanent, and we have to think about the actual decrease so that it can be absorbed by the different classes of property that we have defined.
Senator Hansen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And to L015, I would urge rejection of this amendment. I believe it takes us in the wrong direction, and we have contemplated the possible initiative that may or may not move forward. We've already contemplated that in 293, but what we are doing here right now today as a body is we're doing our jobs. We are making sure that there is proper, adequate funding for the services that the people of the state of Colorado have demanded, have asked for, have funded, and with 293, we get to continue to do that. So I urge rejection of L015, and I find it fascinating that we are going to see no votes from folks who would like to reduce taxes on a bill that will reduce property taxation in the state of Colorado. That's what we've just heard. That's what 293 does. It provides immediate certainty of property tax relief for the state of Colorado. That's what a yes vote on the bill means, and I urge a no vote on this amendment.
Mr. Minority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, to the 3 people who are actually watching and listening, maybe there's 30 or 300 or 3,000, I don't know.
You have my full attention, Mr. Minority Leader.
It's kind of weird here in the chamber because the hours drone on, and sometimes it feels like we're just up here talking to ourselves. But it's a fascinating discussion. You have seen the good senator, one of the good senators from Denver, sponsor the bill, come and defend it. And you've heard from 5, 6 members of the minority caucus, Republicans. Different views. I'm a no. Good senator from Monument, I believe, is a no. Senator from Weld is a no, but there's a few folks who come up who have an R by their name said they're for it. Also heard again from my good friend from Carbondale. He's brilliant. But we've talked a lot, not necessarily about 293, but in the past about thorough and uniform when it comes to funding schools. And this is the same kind of discussion. Why can't we come up with just one way of doing it? And property taxes, that's what this bill would do. It would be statewide. And I think I heard my friend from Carbondale mention, we ought to be able to do this county by county, and I don't think we can. There's another part of the state constitution that people tend to not be very familiar with, but it is unique. Article 5, Section 25 of the Colorado Constitution. And I think it applies here. I think it applies to the amendment. I think it applies certainly to the underlying bill. Special legislation prohibited. The General Assembly, that's us, the state lawmakers here in this here state, the General Assembly shall not pass local or special laws in any of the following enumerated cases. That is to say, for granting of divorces, laying out, opening, altering, or working roads or highways. Your town and city council, your mayor, your county commissioners, they do a lot of work, decisions on your roadways and your communities. We can't pass a bill to do something specific like that here because our Constitution doesn't allow us to do it. Vacating roads, town plats, streets, alleys, and public grounds, locating or changing county seats, regulating county or township affairs, we're a local control state, regulating the practice in courts of justice, regulating the jurisdiction and duties of police magistrates, changing the rules of evidence in any trial or inquiry, providing for the changes of venue in civil or criminal cases, declaring any person of age for limiting of civil actions or giving effect to informal and invalid deeds, summoning or impaneling grand or petite juries. That was a fascinating discussion last year because we had people who wanted us to investigate persons or companies and effectively become the judicial branch. But our Constitution says we can't do that. Providing for the management of common schools. Yes. Who provides the management of common schools in this state? Your school board, not the General Assembly. Regulating the rate of interest on any money, the opening or conducting of any election. Boy, that was an interesting conversation last year, wasn't it? We heard from thousands of people who wanted us, I think, to open, investigate, audit, and election. But we don't have that authority here. Or designating the place of voting, the sale of mortgage or real estate belonging to minors or others under disability, the protection of game or fish. That's odd. We have a state agency, a department, a division that does that, but creating, increasing, or decreasing fees. Boy, that's a fascinating one right there in our Constitution, isn't it? Percentage or allowance of public officers, changing the law of descent, granting to any corporation, association, or individual the right to lay down railroad tracks, granting to any corporation, association, or individual any special or exclusive privilege, immunity, or franchise, whatever. In all other cases where the general law can be applicable, no special law shall be enacted. Now, I've said many times, I'm not an attorney, but my layperson, part-time citizen legislator eyes and mind reads that to mean that we'll have a statewide property tax policy. One size fits many. So what we're debating right now is a change in the existing policy that honors places like Douglas County, where I live, and rural parts of the state where some of my colleagues live. And it applies equally in property taxes as school funding, or similarly. It's what drives the discussion in school funding, in my opinion. We have this thorough and uniform requirement, and we have this PPR, this base amount that we allocate per student no matter where they are. And then we have the factors: English language learners, high cost learning, free and reduced lunch. But then the local school districts, 178 of them, can go out and pass bond and mill overrides. And my friend from Carbondale and I have talked about this many a time. I don't dislike him because we see it differently. We're observing, I think, the same issues in this unique state of Colorado. We just see different solutions. I don't want to speak for him, but I think he would rather see us come up with a solution here that would somehow change, modify, maybe do away with local bond and mill overrides. I don't like bond and mill overrides. I've advocated against them in my county, third largest school district in the state, Douglas County School District. But people who disagree with me politically and have elected 7 members to our school board, none of whom I voted for, managed to pass a bond and mill override. And the people of Douglas County finally said, a majority of people who vote in odd-year elections said yes to a bond and mill override. We're a local control state. The legislature doesn't do that. The people of counties, the people of incorporated municipalities, special districts, school districts, they get to do that. And people move to Colorado from other states that don't have constitutions like this one, where decisions are made more top-down, centralized. Either the governor or the legislature or both decide things for them. But that's not how Colorado works. What I have a hard time understanding is how members in this chamber who represent suburban or more urban districts would vote for it. That doesn't make sense to me, but that's your call. It's local control. The citizens of your district, they elected you. Maybe it is fear that this ballot initiative might take $1 billion out of the general fund if it passes. I mentioned earlier that if I were on JBC, that might cause me to have a heart attack. Finite amount of money. Oh, this Constitution also requires that we pass a budget every year, and it must be balanced. So $1 billion hit to the general fund, that's state tax dollars, that's real money. And that's what I see in 293. Maybe people who just don't want to see less money would support the bill, because if the ballot initiative passes, this will mean the state will have less decrease. We won't have more money, we'll just see less decrease. If the ballot initiative passes and this bill passes, then we'll have less decrease. Instead of $1 billion, I think it'll be somewhere around $200 to $300 million. So maybe people who who want government to have more money would vote yes on this bill. I'm not one of those. I represent a district that wants, I'm sure, the majority of property owners and taxpayers in Douglas County. I am highly confident that the majority of them, if they find out what the ballot initiative will propose, they would say yes. They would sign the petition, put it on the ballot, and they'd vote yes. And I think that's the underlying, concern for some people voting yes on this bill is they're afraid that ballot initiative will be successful. They want to cut $1 billion down to 200 or 300 million. I say vote no on the bill, sign the petition, and vote yes if it's on your ballot.
Senator Kirkmeyer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to come back up and be clear. I wasn't speaking to whether or not we should support the ballot initiative 27 should it get on the ballot, or any ballot initiative for that matter. And I know we were kind of called into question a little bit, like why were we talking about initiative 27? And the reason is because it was presented in the slideshow, in the slide presentation. It was discussed. What would happen to the assessment rates, if only Senate Bill 293 passed? What would happen if 293 and the proposed initiative gets on the ballot and passes? What happens if only the ballot initiative passes? Because I think there's still even probably confusion in this room, and for the 3 people who are watching, I think I should just go through and explain it. Because I think it's a bit disingenuous as to what we're doing with regard to the initiative process. And we're not arguing today about whether or not the ballot initiative, or should there be a ballot initiative that lowers everybody's taxes by huge amounts, by $1 billion. What I'm arguing about is a process, initiative process that's in the Constitution, and how we're being a bit disingenuous, maybe not a bit, but how we're being disingenuous with Senate Bill 293. So, Senate Bill 293 passes. Keep in mind, within the bill, we are changing definitions for the residential classification, or we're changing the classification and adding in subclasses, or both. But if 293 passes for residential multifamily, the assessment ratio drops from 7.15 to 6.8. For primary owner occupied, it drops from 7.15 to 6.95. For other, like second homes, short-term rentals, it would not drop, it would stay at 7.15. For agricultural residential, it would drop from 7.15 to 6.95. If 293 passes only, non-residential, as it's defined right now, has all the classes within it. But within 293, it defines non-residential essentially as only lodging. So, 293 only passes, agriculture and renewable energy become new subclassifications, and they would drop from 29% to 26.0 now because of the amendment, right? Renewable energy would drop from 29 to 26 point. That's if 293 passes. And that would happen for 2 years. It's a 2-year guarantee of that. But for lodging and commercial, they wouldn't drop at all. They would be at 29%. If only the initiative that has been proposed, if it gets on the ballot and it passes, everything under the residential category, multifamily, primary owner occupied, and other second homes and short-term rentals would all drop from 7.15 to 6.5. Agriculture, renewable energy, lodging, and commercial would all drop from 29% to 26.4%. Now, in year 3, if both 293 pass and the proposed initiative 27 passes, here's what happens because of the definition changes in legislation that is being proposed at the very end of the session. Because the definition for residential changes to only be multifamily and primary owner occupied and other becomes a subclassification, doesn't fall in the definition for residential as it is listed in the proposed ballot initiative, only multifamily will drop to 6.5. Primary owner occupied will go back to 7.15. For agriculture and renewable energy, because they are no longer part of the definition or part of the classification, if you will, of non-residential, they are now a subclass, so they're not actually considered non-residential for purposes of the proposed initiative. They will go back up to 29%. Renewable energy, back up to 29%. Commercial will stay at 29%. And only lodging will drop to 26%. Because of the definition changes and the classification and subclasses that are now put into 293. That's what I mean by being disingenuous. That's what I mean by pulling out the rug from underneath the people who have the right to an initiative process. You're changing the rules in the middle of the game. I don't think that's fair. I think that's disingenuous. That's why I'm voting no on this bill, because I don't think that's ethical. I'm not sure it's lawful, but I definitely know it's not ethical. So that's why I'm voting no. And I ask for your aye vote on L015.
Is there any further discussion of the amendment? Senator Lundeen.
Thank you very much. Wanted to rebut a couple of the comments that were made earlier and then put a fine point on some of these rate issues and the confusion that occurs if both the initiative and the bill pass. The question that there are a multiplicity of districts, many districts, 64 counties, many districts in each district or each county. This is true. It has always been so. The bill doesn't change that. The initiative doesn't change that. That reality doesn't matter. What we're talking about is the statewide rate that is set on property and the effect that the repeal of Gallagher had and the relief that would be temporary under this bill and permanent under the initiative as it's being brought forward. The argument was also made around the certainty of a tax reduction from the bill. Well, the reality is there is a certainty that you get 20% of the reduction that you would get with the initiative. The initiative is $1 billion in savings to the taxpayers, and the bill is a $200 million savings to taxpayers. So I wanted to speak to that. But the real crux to this particular issue, the amendment, is the confusion that is created. What happens now for the next 2 years and in the third year and fourth year and beyond if both the initiative and the bill pass? And here's what happens, and this is why this amendment is so important. This amendment would clear this up. It says, the amendment, that should the initiative pass, the initiative would prevail. And it matters because under the bill and initiative combined, as the bill would affect the reality of our laws, the rate in the third year for primary owner occupied, that's homes, that's people's homes we're talking about, moves up from 6.5 to 7.15. That's a 10% increase when you look at what it would be based on the lower rate. And on the non-residential side, we'll just look at one element. What does it do to agriculture in that third year? It's a 9% increase to agriculture. So that's why, in fact, this amendment is so critical, to make clear that the will of the people, should it be presented in the initiative, as we anticipate Initiative 27, which is already before the title board, would bring, is the protection of those dramatically lower rates. A 10% delta, a 10% difference in rate is fundamental. Whether it's on your home or on your farm or ranch, that matters. And that's why Amendment L015 is so important, and I urge your support of the amendment.
Seeing no, Senator Rankin.
Well, I'll urge a no vote on the amendment. The differences between permanence and 2 years, we cannot know the future. We don't know the future of property tax increases or decreases. We must have the ability to reevaluate. That's why we did away with Tabor. It was a permanent change that Gallagher, I'm sorry, thank you. It was a permanent change that we could not revise. Get out of here. It was a permanent change that would have taken a vote to replace. Permanence does not make sense, and it still doesn't make sense for the majority of people on the Front Range to control every little district throughout the state. So I urge a no vote.
Now seeing no further discussion of Amendment L015, all those in favor of the amendment say aye. Aye. Opposed, no? No. Noes have it, and that amendment is lost. Is there any further discussion of Senate Bill 293? Senator Gonzalez. I feel an amendment coming to the desk. Will the clerk please read Amendment 16?
Amendment L016 to Senate Bill 293.
Senator Gonzalez.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move L16 to Senate Bill 293.
To the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Colleagues, we have had a fascinating discussion today about the history and the impacts of our past tax policy decisions on our current budget reality. And one of the things that I find really frustrating and that I hear from my constituents about all of the time is, oh my gosh, how come we cannot fund our values? Why can't we actually fund the priorities that we care about? Basic things like schools and roads and healthcare. And then we go down the road of moving forward policies or ballot initiatives or constitutional amendments that limit our ability to actually fund the things that we care about. And so what L016 seeks to do is to state that for the next 2 budget years, 2022-23 and 23-24 budget years, let's ensure that we maintain our commitment to keep the negative factor constant. It is what is reflected in the intent of the fiscal note, but I think that if we're going to move forward, let us make this clear in the plain black letters on the white paper of Senate Bill 293. I ask for an aye vote. I hope that the sponsors will see this as a friendly amendment, because I do believe that what the discussion has entailed thus far from the proponents of this measure is that this won't result in reductions, it will result in smaller amounts of growth. So I ask for an aye vote on L16.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Senator
I ask
Smalley.
for a title ruling.
We'll take a senatorial 5. The chair rules that the amendment is outside the scope of the title. To the bill, Senate Bill 293, Senator Gonzalez. There is an amendment coming to the desk. Will the clerk please read L017?
Amendment L017.
Senator Gonzalez.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move L17 to 293.
To the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think that there has been, I listened to as much as I could of the debate in committee, the discussion between proponents and opponents of Senate Bill 293 yesterday afternoon. And previous discussions on a previous amendment earlier today spoke pretty clearly about the fact that Senate Bill 293 is a response to Initiative 27. And so, and what I found a little confusing about the Finance Committee discussion was some of the confusion around what is contained within Initiative 27 and then what is contained within Senate Bill 293. So I thought it might be prudent to just outline and add into the bill itself Initiative 27's language. And then you'll see on page 2 of the amendment, starting on lines 8 and proceeding down to about line 25, an acknowledgement that if this is confusing for us as legislators, it might also be confusing to voters. And although the Blue Book is an excellent resource, I use it, my family uses it, my constituents use it, I often hear about what a good resource it is, that on this one, it alone might not be enough to explain and clarify the differences between the property tax changes potentially being enacted by Senate Bill 293 and the potential implications of Initiative 27. And so Amendment L17 instructs the Secretary of State to educate voters and to clarify the differences between these two policies and how people would be impacted. Further, the last part of this amendment instructs the assessors and administrators to educate taxpayers about any potential changes if Senate Bill 293 is enacted, as well as if Initiative 27 is enacted. In their next mailing available, to include that education so that folks understand concretely the impact of these policies and what that will mean for them in real dollars and real cents. I ask for an aye vote on L17.
Senator Lundeen.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Very interesting amendment, very big amendment on a bill moving very fast. A big part of what it does is restates the title set initiative language. I won't take the time to restate that here. That's firmly in the record and visible everywhere. But this amendment's time may come and go, so I want to acknowledge into the record some of the language it uses. It says, thus the ballot question for the initiated measure would not accurately describe its effect when limited by Senate Bill 21-293, and this could lead to significant voter confusion. Although the Blue Book prepared by Legislative Council staff is an excellent resource for educating voters about ballot measures, it alone may not be sufficient to address this complex situation, and additional measures are necessary. Notwithstanding any law to the contrary, if under the provisions of this Article 40, the initiated measure reducing property tax revenue is on the ballot at the November 2021 statewide election, the Secretary of State shall undertake a campaign to educate voters about how the initiated measure has been modified by Senate Bill 21-293. The classes of residential real property and the non-residential real property that will be affected, and the adjusted fiscal impact of the initiated measure. The voter education required by this section supplements the ballot information as normally prepared, etc. Then it goes on to give additional responsibilities to the state administrator and assessor, and requires ongoing and additional descriptions and information. So, having put all of that into the record, I think this is interesting, but it, quite frankly, makes the case I was trying to make earlier. Point one. Point two, I think it disrupts and challenges what the initiative and ballot process and Blue Book process would look like. Who is to determine? Does this go back to the title board to make sure the description in the education campaign lines up with a true and objective analysis of what's going on? What would that process look like? Should it be stakeholded? Should a task force be created to work with the Secretary of State to make sure that those who brought the initiative don't perceive the education campaign brought by the Secretary of State's office does violence to the effort they are trying to bring forward? I think there are any number of challenges and difficulties inherent in that. Is the idea of education conceptually brilliant? Absolutely. But what does that education look like? Does it have a tone? Does it have a spin? Does it lead the population one way or another? That is the risk of this. Same thing falls to the additional responsibilities required of the state administrator and assessor. What does this additional description look like? Who gets to determine? Who gets to define? So at the end of the day, while I agree that there is an enormous amount of confusion caused by 293 with regard to the initiative, it's part of, and quite frankly, my primary objection to 293, this legislative declaration, it's not even part of the bill, it's just a legislative declaration, I think creates additional confusion and additional problems and would make the process of educating potentially even more problematic and more confusing. What happens if the Secretary of State produces information, then the sponsors of the initiative say to the public, whoa, 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 that official document you're getting from the Secretary of State's office doesn't line up at all with what we believe the initiative does and 293 does in relationship to the initiative. That would be absolutely incorrect for the Secretary of State now to be in contradiction with the people, the citizens who rose up and brought the initiative. I think we need to be careful about that. And unfortunately, although I completely agree with the tone, the tenor, the objective of the amendment, I oppose it simply because I think it creates complexities that may well work to disadvantage the effort and create greater confusion, even though it seeks to create greater enlightenment. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Senator Heisey.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate the sponsor's efforts here, and I really believe her head and her heart are in the right place in trying to make good information available to the citizens on a complicated subject. I am quite concerned about directing government agencies, one being Secretary of State, and then you go down to the county level. Both of those are going to carry a fiscal impact. But my real concern is one person's education is another person's electioneering. I can almost guarantee there will be a lawsuit if both of those parties put forward campaigns, or even just including the various ratios of valuation that the assessor is required to put forward. That's not something that's commonly done. It will definitely be looked at as an electioneering by one side or the other because it is not the standard practice of the assessor. I urge a no vote on this amendment.
Is there any further discussion of L 017? Senatorial 5 has been requested and granted. Senator Gonzalez.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move that we sever Amendment L17.
1 minute. We are back. Joy is over now. We are in second reading on 293. There's far too much silliness occurring here. Senator Gonzalez.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Because it appears that providing actual additional education to the voters about what the potential implications of both Senate Bill 293 and the potential implications of Initiative 27 seem to be viewed with questioned, skepticism. Let me just make a note of that. The opponents to this amendment are afraid of providing voters with more information. Okay, given that, I move to sever.
That was questioning another senator's motives is not something we're allowed to do here. So I understand that we're being.
Friday, it's been a long day. I'm trying to
Totally get it.
Yeah.
What's the motion, Senator Gonzalez?
The motion is to sever Amendment L17 between lines 27, page 2, lines 28.
Between lines 26 and 27, so on page 9 after line 5, insert section 10 in Colorado Revised Statutes. Is that where you'd like to sever it?
Between lines 26 and 27, that is correct.
Excellent.
Through the end of the amendment on page 3, line 1.
I believe that is a motion that we need a voice vote on. The motion is to sever the amendment. Do we need to vote on that? Senatorial 5. The amendment is severed. We'll have 17A for before that and 17B for after that as we move forward on this. So, Senator Gonzalez, would you like to move to withdraw 17A?
Yes, Mr. Chair, I move to withdraw severed section A of L17.
Severed section A of L17 is withdrawn. To severed section B of L17. Senator Gonzalez.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move severed section B of L17 and ask for an aye vote. Colleagues, just as a reminder, this is ensuring that the administrator and assessors notify taxpayers about the potential implications of Senate Bill 293 and how that might impact them.
Is there any further discussion of Senator Hansen?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And I think 17B, L017B, is a wonderful addition to this bill. I want to thank the senator for bringing it. And I think this would be a great way to provide information to property taxpayers from around the state. So I urge your support.
Is there any further? Senator Rankin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would ask for an aye vote on the amendment. I think it definitely will clarify the tax classes and help the voters.
Is there any further discussion of section B of L17? Seeing none, the question before us is the adoption of 17B. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. The ayes for sure have it on that one. This amendment is adopted. To the bill. We're not voting right now, Senator. To the bill. Is there any further discussion of Senate Bill 293? Oh, we've got another amendment at the desk. Will the clerk please read Amendment L013? Senator Hansen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. During this wonderful discussion that we had a chance to reconnect with our wonderful drafting team, and I move L013.
To the amendment.
Thank you. Members, just a very small kind of parallel construction amendment, technical in nature, basically says that multifamily residential real property is a subclass of residential real property, which of course is the proposal in Senate Bill 293. So I urge your support of L013.
Senator Lundeen.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I rise in support of this. In our haste to draft the bill, we were confused. This amendment helps clean up the drafting of the bill. The residual confusion created between the bill and the initiative process remains. Opposition to the bill is strong. This amendment is an indication of how moving too fast can sometimes get you into trouble. I'm glad we caught this one at this point, and in fact, it cleans things up. I urge your support of L13.
Although 17B did help to address some of that potential future confusion. Seeing no further discussion, the question before us is the adoption of L013. All those in favor say aye. Opposed, no. Ayes have it, and that amendment is adopted. Is there any further discussion of Senate Bill 293? Seeing no further discussion of Senate Bill 293, the question before us is the adoption of Senate Bill 293. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Ayes have it, and Senate Bill 293 is adopted. Mr. Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move the committee to rise and report.
The motion is for the committee to rise and report. All those in favor say aye. Opposed, no. Ayes have it, and the committee will rise and report, although the chair is disappointed at the lack of volume from the ayes.
The Senate will come back to order. Senator Bridges.
Thank you, Mr. President. The committee has met and had a bill under consideration. Will the clerk please read the report?
Mr. President, committee of the whole begs leave to report has had under consideration the following attached bill being the second reading thereof makes the following recommendations thereon. Senate Bill 293 as amended passed on second reading, ordering gross and placed on the calendar for third reading and final passage.
Senator Bridges.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move the report.
The motion is for the adoption of the committee of the whole report. Are there any no votes? With 34 ayes, 0 noes, 0 absent, 1 excused, the committee of the whole report is adopted. Senate Bill 293 as amended passed on second reading, ordered gross placed on the calendar for third reading and final passage. Message from the House.
June 4th, Mr. President, the Speaker has appointed Representative McCormick, Chairman Roberts, and Holtorf as House conferees on the First Conference Committee on Senate Bill 21248. The House has passed on third reading and transmitted to the revisor statutes House Bill 1309, 1325, 1329, amended as printed in House Journal June 3rd. The House has passed on third reading and transmitted to revisor statutes House Bill 1326 and 1330, amended as printed in House Journal June 3rd, and amended on third reading as printed in House Journal June 4th. The House has passed on third reading and transmitted to revisor statutes House Bill 1328. The House has passed on third reading and transmitted to revisor statute Senate Bill 194, amended as printed in House Journal June 3rd. The House has passed on third reading and transmitted to revisor statute Senate Bill 280, amended as printed in House Journal June 3rd, and amended on third reading as printed in House Journal June 4th. The House has adopted and returns herewith SJR 23. The House has adopted and returns SJR 21, amended as printed in House Journal June 4th. The House has adopted and transmits herewith HJR 1011 as printed in House Journal May 13th.
Message from the revisor.
June 4th. Message from revisor. We herewith transmit without comment House Bill 1328, without comment as amended House Bills 1309, 1325, 1326, 1329, 1330, without comment as amended Senate Bills 194 and 280.
Message from the governor.
Friday, June 4th, Colorado Senate. Honorable members of the Colorado Senate, pursuant to the authority vested in the office of the Governor of the State of Colorado, I have the honor to inform you that I have approved and filed with the Secretary of State the following acts. Senate Bill 11, pharmacists prescribed dispense opiate antagonists, approved on Friday, June 4th at 12:30 p.m. Senate Bill 35, restrictions on third-party food delivery services, approved on Friday, June 4th at 12:30 p.m. Okay, okay.
Conference committees to report.
First report on First Conference Committee on House Bill 1301 to the President of the Senate and the Speaker of the House of Representatives. Your First Conference Committee appointed on House Bill 1301 concerning the removal of impediments to cannabis farming and in connection therewith permitting contingency plans to reduce crop loss based on adverse weather and convening a working group to examine measures to reduce cross-pollination and make an appropriation has met and reports that it has agreed upon the following: that the House accede to the Senate amendments made to the bill as the amendments appear in the revised bill with the following changes. Respectively submitted, House Committee, Representative Escar, Chair, Caravello, and Holtorf. Senate Committee, Senator Moreno, Chair, and Senator Winter. First report on First Conference Committee on House Bill 1251 to the President of the Senate and the Speaker of the House of Representatives. Your First Conference Committee appointed on House Bill 1251 concerning the appropriate use of ketamine upon a person in a pre-hospital setting and in connection therewith making an appropriation has met and reports that it has agreed upon the following: that the House accede to the Senate amendments made to the bill as the amendments appear in the revised bill with the following changes. Respectfully submitted, House Committee, Caravello, Chair, Representative Herod. Senate Committee, Senator Gonzalez, Chair, Senator Fields.
In consideration of conference committees to report, will the clerk please read the title of the House Bill 1301?
House Bill 1301 by Representative Escar and Holtorf and Senators Corey and Moreno concerning the removal of impediments to cannabis farming and in connection with permitting contingency plans to reduce crop loss based on adverse weather and convening at a working group to examine measures to reduce cross-pollination and make an appropriation.
Senator Moreno.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move the Senate adopt the first report of the First Conference Committee on House Bill 1301.
Is there any discussion? Senator Quorum.
Thank you, Mr. President. I voted no, and I'm going to tell you why. And this is a couple of news stories that I will just give you of why I voted no. I found out you lose 5-1 when, but I guess that's a loss. But this Poison Center warns about dangers of Delta 8 THC. Gummy worms containing 10 milligrams of cannabinoid are displayed in Cannabis World. So it goes on to say, Charleston, West Virginia. The West Virginia Poison Center is warning citizens about the dangers of Delta 8 THC. This drug is being sold as a fruit-flavored gummies and vaping solutions in shops that sell CBD and vaping supplies, as well as gas stations and convenience stores. Poison Center says Delta 8 THC gummies should not be confused with CBD gummies or other CBD or hemp-containing products. Delta 8 is currently legal, but can have harmful reactions in more than one dose is taken. And it also can be dangerous in a single dose if taken by a child. Reports of significant adverse reactions after adults ingested what they thought was a similar product have been sent to the West Virginia Poison Control. Delta 8 THC is not the same thing as CBD. More than one dose may cause harm. Even one dose may cause harm if the product does not actually contain the labeled ingredients. These products are not regulated, so there is no assurance that the label is correct. Fruit-flavored gummies containing drugs can easily be mistaken for candy by young children, said Dr. Sharman, the West Virginia Poison Center, and professor of clinical pharmacy at West Virginia University in Charleston. Officials say in other states, kids have required admission to intensive care units after eating Delta 8 products. Michigan Poison Center issues warning about Delta 8 THC. The Michigan Poison Center at the Wayne State University School of Medicine is warning the public about products containing Delta 8 THC, a compound that can cause adverse health effects. Due to misleading packaging and possibly the products can be mistaken for CBD products. Early in March 21, poison centers throughout the United States were made aware of both adult and pediatric exposures to products containing Delta 8. These products have been mistaken for CBD containing products. Delta 8 THC is a component of the cannabis sativa, but is chemically different from Delta 9, which is the main psychoactive ingredient of marijuana and causes psychoactive effects similar to Delta 9. The Michigan Poison Center notified the Department of Health and Human Services of the substances being reported near Michigan. Products containing Delta THC are sold in vape shops as vaping liquids and gummy supplements and are marketed as a legal high. Shortly after notification in the late March, the Michigan Department of Health alerted the Michigan Poison Center at the Wayne State University of Medicine in Michigan, law enforcement had seized Delta 8 THC sold as CBD products in the state. Because products containing Delta 8 THC are packaged in similar forms as CBD, young children and teens have higher risk of accidental use. The Michigan Poison Control is warning public about these products due to misleading packaging and adverse health effects from accidental use. I could go on and on and on. But in Colorado, we even have a product that's out there that's containing Delta 8, and it's called Girl Scout cookies. Now, to let you know, Delta 8 is from 50 to 75% the potency of Delta 9. But that takes into account the dosage. Do you grab one gummy? Do you eat 10? Folks, we're looking at a dangerous product here, and I was told that the department is looking at regulatory efforts. Well, good for them. But there's no legal standing, no rulemaking in regulatory process. I'm a no on this bill, on concurrence. I think this needs further discussion. We do not know. We've got a lot of people that are very tight in the hemp and marijuana industry that are trying to push this through. I absolutely think it is the wrong thing to do at the wrong time. And to tell me that we're going to wait a year when we've got all this information coming from poison centers is absolutely wrong. I am a no on the report.
Mr. Minority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. I join my friend from Montrose in asking for a no vote on the conference committee report. This is somewhat unbelievable. I took on pretty much on my own argument on another bill regarding high concentrate THC. What is complicated about this? Cannabis is a type of plant. We define hemp cannabis as having low THC Delta 9. And anything that is above the threshold is a 0.3. If it's above 0.3, then it can't be called hemp. It's cannabis that's called marijuana. Hemp and marijuana, all cannabis, you could find deltas 8, 9, and 10. What are those deltas? They are cannabinoids. What are cannabinoids? The easiest way I've found to describe it to people who don't understand what cannabinoids are, think about Legos. If you were a kid or if you have kids that played with Legos, think about cannabinoids as the little Legos. They're all different colors. and you snap like 144 of them together. Deltas 8, 9, and 10 would line up, think of like a DNA molecule, a strand. So the cannabinoids are in the cannabis plant. That might be why they call it cannabis. It's a cannabinoid. Do you know your body, the human body, produces cannabinoids? Not all the same ones that are in cannabis, but cannabinoids, it's not some spooky word. But up until recently, science, the industry, thought that only one of those 144 or so cannabinoids could get you high, could have a psychoactive effect, and that's the cannabinoid Delta 9. I won't try to say the 27-letter word, but we thought that Delta 9 was the only one of the cannabinoids that could get you high if it was present enough, in high enough concentration, and if it was activated by heat. Recently, the industry has discovered, oh wait, if you can extract cannabinoids Delta 8 and 10, which would be adjacent to Delta 9 in the string, Deltas 8 and 10, if you can concentrate them enough, remember the bill that you all supported about marijuana concentrates? It's the same thing. It's just two other cannabinoids, Delta 8 and 9, Delta 8 and 10. Turns out there's at least 3 cannabinoids in cannabis that can be psychoactive. Deltas 8, Deltas 9, Delta 10. This amendment that we made to 1301 and is now struck out by this committee report says that the Marijuana Enforcement Division, MED, should not study this issue. Now, some people will say, well, it's just hemp. It's cannabis. It's hemp because Delta 9 is low. What if Deltas 8 and 10 are really high? Very significant portions. We still call it hemp. These two cannabinoids, Delta 8 and 10, are being extracted from cannabis. Most of the time it's hemp. Oh, that's nothing to worry about. Hemp can't get you high. It has low THC9. Right. But guess what? They're concentrating Delta cannabinoids 8 and 10 in high concentrations. That's what the bill was that we just debated here and passed unanimously. And since our government, this government, Colorado, guess what we don't regulate? Deltas 8 and 9. Deltas 8 and 10. We regulate Delta 9. That's the cannabinoid that can get you high. People who don't understand this or don't want to take the time think that we regulate the marijuana. It's the Delta 9 that gets you high. Now we find out that Deltas 8 and 10 get you high too. And kids are buying concentrated gummies or candies with Deltas 8 and 10 in it. Since it doesn't have Delta 9 in it, it's not regulated. That's what this amendment sought to do. And the committee took that out. So, if you vote yes on the conference committee report, why in the world did you vote yes on the marijuana concentrates bill? It's absolutely backwards. This should stay in the committee report, and I don't understand why anyone thinks it should come out. This is not rocket science. It's easy. I can learn it. Please vote no on this conference committee report. If you voted yes on the marijuana concentrates bill because you wanted to protect children, you are being a hypocrite by supporting this conference committee report. There's no other way to put it. These two cannabinoids can be concentrated and get people high. And you're saying, no problem. Let's keep doing that if you vote yes on this conference report. This is wrong. Please vote no.
Senator Lundin.
Mr. President, thank you very much. The point I was going to make has just been forcefully made. The reality is these Delta 8 and Delta 10, when concentrated and unregulated in the state of Colorado, present a risk. And the bill 1301 as amended, as it left this chamber, said let's at least study that and figure out how to get at it. I'm committed, I will tell you, to dealing with this issue, if not today, at some other time. But the reality is I oppose the conference committee report for these very reasons. Thank you, Mr. President.
Senator Moreno.
Thank you, Mr. President. And colleagues, I would again encourage you to adopt the first report of the first conference committee. The reality is that we can have this policy debate all day long. It didn't belong in this bill. This bill is about facilitating outdoor cultivation and setting the parameters around that. The reality is that the amendment that was added was attempted to be added to House Bill 1317, and that was not successful. So when they weren't successful there, they came looking for any title that they could, added it here, and it doesn't belong in this bill. I encourage your adoption of this conference committee report.
Senator Quorum.
Thank you, Mr. President, and I actually disagree with my good friend from Commerce City. The title is about hemp and marijuana. And the fact that if we're saying, well, we're going to take care of it next year, we've got the CDC, poison control, telling us the dangers of it, but we don't want to believe that. It is a dangerous product that is unregulated, and it needs the rule of law to give it the authority it needs to regulate. And I'm a hemp farmer, or was. I would do nothing to destroy the hemp industry. It's done it on its own. And as I said in committee, this is an attempt. Pueblo is basically the largest area in the state that with outdoor marijuana grows, some over in the San Luis Valley. But they're worried about cross-pollination and contamination. They don't want the 3% hemp contaminating, cross-pollinating with their 20 to 25% THC. And what they're asking for is actually going to end the outdoor marijuana industry. Because the same thing happened with hemp. We had 18,000 acres. In my first year raising hemp, that value was $175,000 an acre. And everybody wanted in the hemp industry. And everybody got in the hemp industry. And we put out over 100,000 acres. Anybody want to buy my 2019 crop? I'll tell you what, I'll take $1 a pound for it. I'll take 50 cents. If you come and get it, I'll give it to you. We are going down a road that I think is very dangerous. I don't think hemp is designed to be scientifically enhanced to raise the THC. Take a legal a product that's 0.3 and convert it to a high potency that can get you high. We heard about the kid in the motel that got on marijuana, thought he could fly, and jumped off the balcony. This is a dangerous product. I think that at least it deserves more discussion. Unfortunately, this is coming around at the end of session, but 1 year is too long to wait to protect the children. I ask for a division on the vote.
It's a recorded vote, so there is no division.
Senator Moreno.
Thank you, Mr. President. And colleagues, again, this is not really about the policy. It's about the fact that this amendment never belonged in this bill in the first place. But just so you know, so you have full context and information, there are wheels already in motion on this. The reality is that the Marijuana Enforcement Division and the Department of Public Health and Environment have issued guidance that bans the sale of Delta-8 derived hemp and marijuana, and they are initiating a stakeholder process that starts on Monday.
The motion is the adoption of the first report on the first conference committee on House Bill 1301. Are there any no votes? Senators Lundin, Quorum, the Minority Leader, Cook, Simpson, Scott, Heisey, Gardner, Kirkmeyer, Priola, Smallwood, Woodward, with 22 aye votes, 12 no votes, 0 absent, and 1 excuse. The first report on the first conference committee on House Bill 1301 is adopted. Senator Moreno.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move for the repassage of House Bill 1301.
The motion is for the repassage. Senator Quorum.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would ask that the bill be passed, but I'm concerned that the 8 people who voted yes were not in the room to hear the argument.
Is there further discussion? Seeing none, the motion before the body is the move for the repassage of House Bill 1301. Are there any no votes? Senators Cook, Scott, with 32 ayes, 2 no votes, 0 absent, 1 excuse, House Bill 1301 is repassed. Co-sponsors. Will the clerk please read the title to House Bill 1251?
House Bill 1251 by Representatives Caraveo and Herod and Senators Fields and Gonzalez concerning the appropriate use of ketamine upon a person in a pre-hospital setting.
Senator Gonzalez.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that the Senate adopt the first report of the first conference committee on House Bill 1351.
Is there any discussion? Seeing none, the motion is for the adoption of the first report on the first conference committee on House Bill 1251. Are there any no votes? Senators Gardner, Heisey, Kirkmeyer, Minority Leader, Cook, Smallwood, Lundin, Rankin, Quorum, Scott, Woodward, Priola, Simpson, with 21 ayes, 13 no votes, 0 absent, 1 excused, the first report of the first conference committee on House Bill 1251 is adopted. Senator Gonzalez.
Thank you, Mr. President. We move for the repassage of House Bill 1251 on third reading and final passage and ask for an aye vote.
Is there discussion? Seeing none, the motion before the body is the repassage of House Bill 1251. Are there any no votes? Senators Smallwood, Priola, Gardner, Quorum, the Minority Leader, Scott, Simpson, Lundin, Woodward, Cook, Kirkmeyer, Heisey, Rankin. With 21 ayes, 13 no votes, 0 absent, and 1 excuse, House Bill 1251 is repassed. Co-sponsors. Announcements. Mr. Minority Leader.
Members, Game 3 of Round 2 starts at 8 o'clock. The Colorado Avalanche are undefeated in the Stanley Cup playoffs thus far, 6-0. They play in Vegas tonight, again, 8 o'clock. Let's be sure to get through committee expeditiously so we can all get home and get in our recliners and turn on the game. Go Avs!
Senator Quorum.
Thank you, Mr. President. Appreciate all the hard work that's gone on here today. And today was started out as a great day. The good senator from Greeley and good senator from Denver did a resolution about donuts. And of course, the fat guy always likes the donuts. But then something happened that was just rather disturbing to me. You know, we often talk about respecting and talking about helping and understanding peoples with disabilities. And frankly, it was disturbing to me that the senator from Jefferson County come to my side of the aisle and made this snap. It doesn't work. I was mocked because I'm missing a finger, and that hurt. And I will try to get over it, but I just think we need to be more sensitive to others in this chamber.
Further announcements. Will the message from the House? Third reading of bill's final passage. Will the clerk please read the title of the House Bill 1209?
House Bill 1209 by Representative Gonzalez Gutierrez and Doherty and Senators Lee concerning offenders who committed an offense when under 21 years of age and in connection with making an appropriation.
Senator Lee.
Thank you, Mr. President. I request permission to offer a third reading amendment.
Would the good senator from Colorado Springs please explain to the body why we should allow you permission to offer a third reading amendment?
Well, I know it'll shock the body, but this bill could be improved a little bit. So we proposed an amendment to make it a little better.
The motion before the body is to grant permission to the senator from Colorado Springs to offer a third reading amendment. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed no. The ayes have it and permission is granted. There is an amendment at the desk. Will the clerk please read amendment L016 to the...
Amendment L016 to House Bill 1209.
Senator Lee.
Thank you, Mr. President. There was concern that the people who have committed sex offenses or whose underlying offense was a sexual-based offense could be entered into the program, and that is not the case. And this amendment locks that up with no uncertainty that this program is not available to people who have committed sex offenses. So I move for adoption of Amendment L016.
Is there further discussion? Senator Cook.
Thank you, Mr. President. I ask for an aye vote on the amendment.
Having no further discussion, the motion before the body is the adoption of Amendment L016. Are there any no votes? With 34 ayes, 0 noes, 0 absent, 1 excused, Amendment L016 is adopted. To the bill. Senator Cook.
Thank you, Mr. President. I ask permission to run a third reading amendment.
Would the good senator from Weld County please explain, or from Greeley, please explain to the body why we should give you permission to offer a third reading amendment?
Because this makes the bill just a little bit better again.
The motion before the body is to allow the good senator from Greeley permission to offer a third reading amendment. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed no. The ayes have it and permission is granted. There is an amendment at the desk. Will the clerk please read? Amendment L015.
L015.
Senator Cook.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move Amendment L015.
To the amendment, Senator.
Thank you, Mr. President. It just puts back in to statute the original penalty phase that a person would have to serve before being granted to entry into this program.
Is there discussion? Senator Lee.
Senator Cook's amendment added to my amendment makes the bill almost perfect, so I support the amendment.
Having no further discussion, the motion before the body is the adoption of Amendment L015. Are there any no votes? Senators Fields, Moreno, Senator Fields.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would like to be recorded as a yes vote.
Senator Fields will be recorded as an aye vote on Amendment L015. No votes on Amendment L015. With a vote of 33 ayes, 1 no vote, 0 absent, 1 excuse, Amendment L015 is adopted. To the bill, Senator Lee.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move for passage of House Bill 1209 on third reading. Thank you.
Having no further discussion, the motion is the passage of House Bill 1209. Are there any no votes? Senators Cook, Gardner, Mr. Minority Leader, Senators Lundin, Scott, Simpson, Kirkmeyer, Coram, Janal, Fields, Priola, Heisey, Rankin, Smallwood, Woodward. With 19 ayes, 15 no votes, 0 absent, 1 excuse, House Bill 1209 is passed. Co-sponsors, Senators Gonzalez, Moreno,
Mr. Majority Leader, did you want to lay over the balance of the calendar or introduce some bills real quick?
introduction of bills.
House Bill 1309 by Representatives Roberts and Corver and Senators Lee and Gardner concerning measures related to permitting continuing a criminal trial because of the COVID-19 pandemic.
State Veterans and Military Affairs.
House Bill 1325 by Representative McCluskey and Harrod and Senators Zenzinger and Rankin concerning establishing a school finance legislative interim committee to consider changes to the method for funding public schools to improve student achievement and in connection with making an appropriation.
Finance.
House Bill 1326 by Representative McLaughlin and Will and Senator Story concerning 2020-2021 state fiscal year transfers from the general fund to support outdoor recreation in connection with making an appropriation.
Finance.
House Bill 1328 by Representative Harrod and Van Winkle and Senators Fields and Priola concerning the effective date of Senate Bill 20-123.
State Veterans and Military Affairs.
House Bill 1329 by Representative Gonzalez, Gutierrez, and Woodrow and Senators Holbert and Gonzalez concerning the use of money the state receives from the federal government under the American Rescue Plan of 2021 to make investments in housing to assist persons disproportionately impacted by the COVID-19 public health emergency facing housing insecurity.
State Veterans and Military Affairs.
House Bill 1330 by Representative McCluskey and Ricks and Senators Zenzinger and Kirkmeyer concerning measures to support student success in obtaining post-secondary credentials and in connection with making an appropriation.
Finance. Announcements. Mr. Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Not an announcement, but a motion. I move to lay over the balance of the calendar. Never mind.
Can I make an announcement?
Let's do it. Let announcements happen.
Announcements. Senator Gonzalez.
Thank you, Mr. President. To members of the Senate State Veterans and Military Affairs Committee, we will be hearing 3 bills under consideration today. We will be hearing House Bill 1309, House Bill 1328, and House Bill 1329. In that order, we'll see you 15 minutes upon adjournment, whenever that is, in the Old Supreme Court.
I didn't know if he left.
5:30. 5:30.
Old Supreme Court? In the Old Supreme Court. Thanks, y'all.
I replaced him on the committees, but I don't know if he sent an email and asked to be excused.
I don't think anybody knew he left.
Happy to chair finance. Let's get some stuff done. I'll go kill 2 bills.
Any bills that may be referred? You don't need to? I don't think we're not going to do it. Do you need to do it?
We're not doing it.
The Senate will stand in a brief recess. Come back to order. Announcements. Senator Bridges.
Thank you, Mr. President. The Senate Finance Committee will meet 15 minutes upon adjournment, and we will be hearing House Bill 1325, House Bill 1326, and House Bill 1330. See you soon.
Senator Hansen.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. To my friends on Senate appropriations, I have excellent news for you. We do not need to meet today. However, we will need to meet on Monday morning.
See you, my friend.
We are going to meet Monday morning. So I am expecting some bills to be referred to appropriations. But anything could happen from here on out. So I'll keep you updated on which bills get referred. But please plan on a meeting Monday morning. Let's schedule 8:30 gavel in LSBB. See you soon.
Senator Cook.
Thank you, Mr. President. I request, after speaking to the minority leader and the majority leader, request to be excused for a few hours on Monday until maybe no later than noon.
Senator Cook will be marked excused for Monday after consultation with both the majority leader and the minority leader. Further announcements. Having no further announcements, Mr. Majority Leader.
Until about noon. I should be down. I might be down here for that. Thank you.
We'll talk about it back there. Thank you, Mr. President. Members, I do want to just clarify one thing about Appropriations Committee.
Members, guests.
So I think actually what we may do, and I have not discussed this with the chair of the committee, but in talking about it at the front desk, to have a Monday morning Appropriations Committee would mean that the front desk has to stay open until these committees are finished to read those reports across, to then have a committee before we convene. So it probably is better for everybody that actually we do an Appropriations Committee after we convene here Monday morning. We may have some thirds that we'll want to knock out. We'll read those reports across, and then we'll break for Appropriations Committee. I think that would be the nice thing to do for our loyal front desk staff, so they can get ready and go home for the weekend. So the correction is that there is not a Monday morning Appropriations Committee prior to convening the floor. It will happen after we convene and have those reports to send those bills to that committee.
Even better.
Did we ask them if that's what they wanted? Maybe they want to stay. Do you want to fine Hanson for trying to keep the staff here later than
What'd you say? What'd you say?
Do you want to fine Hanson for trying to keep the staff later here than they're supposed to be?
No other amendments, right?
Have I laid over the balance?
Yes. Mr. President.
Mr. Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. My brain is a little fried. I can't remember if I already did this, so I'm going to do it again just to be sure. I move to lay over the balance of the calendar until Monday, the 7th.
The motion is to lay over the balance of the remaining calendar until Monday. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed, no. The ayes having the motion is adopted, and the balance of the calendar is laid over. Mr. Majority Leader.
Mr. President, I move that the Senate adjourn until Monday, June 7th at 10 a.m.
You have heard the motion. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed, no. The ayes have it, and the motion is adopted, and the Senate will stand in adjournment until Monday, May 7th at 10:00 hours.